Before we get into this episode, I wanted to introduce one of the partners for the show, Move Pre-Workout. I've been using this over the last year and can massively see the benefit with all my training. And I thought I'd invite Tom along, who was involved in the formulation.
Cheers, Mark. Obviously delighted to be supporting the podcast. And so Move Pre-Workout, we've got a strength-based formula, but this one is specifically designed for endurance athletes. And it's one of the first of its kind. We're just focusing on really high-quality ingredients that are going to benefit endurance performance of any kind. So, yeah, we're really excited by the product and delighted to be supporting podcasts like yourself.
Oh, it's amazing. And this is something that you're specifically taking before your training, before your rides, to be in best possible shape. I'd encourage you to give it a try. Go to movepreworkout.com and for a 20% discount, put the word endurance in at checkout. On with the show. Well, a very warm welcome to the Endurance Podcast with myself, Mark Beaumont, and Martin Mansell. We're at the Adventure Travel Show as I glance at my watch here for those watching on YouTube, because the show is coming towards an end. We've been here for 2 days, enjoying filming on the Enjoy Travel podcast stand, and it's been a ton of fun. It's the first time we've shot in this format. We have been to a show before, Kendal Mountain Film Festival, but the other episodes during season 2 of the Endurance Podcast have been shot out on what we call epics, where we go to an amazing location facilitated by Enjoy Travel, and then we do a ride and then a record. And because we've broadened it out, and this whole topic of endurance doesn't have to just be cycling, on the couch, on the sofa over the last couple of days, we've had endurance swimmers, we've had endurance runners, we've had mountaineers. It's created all these conversations about what other epics we should do. We've been invited on some paddling ones, go for some water sports.
Paddle boarding,
yeah,
not paddling, paddle boarding.
Well, you can do doggy paddle if you want, Martin. Is that me?
Paddling.
I think, yeah. Oh, and Amy definitely wants to do a swimming one, but I think we're both scared of that. It's been a ton of fun. And hopefully, as you follow and listen to the Endurance Podcast series, we can go to a lot of other great locations, whether it's live shows or epics, because these conversations are much better face to face. And what's your reflections on the last couple of days, Martin?
It's been fantastic. Yeah, yesterday was.
Your voice.
Am I?
No, I wonder if you are. It's a lot of talking.
I had a sore throat last night, and I wasn't sure if I was coming down with a cold, but it was okay again this morning. So I think it just gets a bit croakier as the day goes on. Right. I don't usually talk for 4 or 5 hours consecutive. But yeah, it's been great. Yesterday was really busy. Today it's still quite busy and noisy, but not as busy as yesterday. But yeah, it's been great.
It definitely feels like the show's coming towards a close.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
A lot of excitement, and I think we'll be packing our bags after this amazing conversation. But we definitely wanted to create the opportunity to invite Duncan Covey on, because Duncan is somebody who I have followed on what is a very recent epic around the world. Duncan, you were on the stage yesterday sharing your stories. It's great to get you back today. Thank you for making the opportunity to come back in for the Endurance Podcast. We've spoken to so many people in the Endurance Podcast series who did stuff over the decades. What I love about your story is you're sort of just back from this epic 36,000 kilometers, taking on this massive journey. You left your job, you set out around the planet, you've built an amazing platform, the audience that vicariously lived that adventure with you. And, whilst you've already pedaled around planet Earth, what I enjoy and appreciate about your journey coming on the Endurance Podcast is it feels like you're just getting started. And I'm quite interested in that perspective for somebody who's taken on their first big epic, and you're now going, and what does that unlock in terms of where I go? So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
So for those who aren't the 72,000 following you on Instagram already, give the potted history of what brought you to pedaling around the planet and where you went.
Yeah, so I grew up down in Cornwall, and I think growing up in the countryside gives you what you might not notice at the time is a wonderful opportunity to get outside and get dirty and spend time doing things like riding bikes and making dens and exploring, which is a small scale version of what you do when you ride a bike around the world. I've ridden bikes for as long as I can remember. I got to university and I started running ultramarathons, not particularly well, but it gave me a taste for going further. I then realized it was much more fun if you do it on the bike. I graduated, I got a job, and I suddenly became aware of the fact that if I wasn't careful, I was going to blink and open my eyes and be old and boring and miss the boats. So I had to do something about it. I'd been saving cash, so I left my job, and I knew if I had one opportunity to go on a big adventure, I had to give it as much as I possibly could. The biggest adventure I could think of was to ride my bike around the world. So that very quickly became the goal. So I set off in April of 2024. Just as spring was beginning to start to warm up Europe, I rode across Europe, aiming for the mountains all the way across Turkey, into Central Asia to get through the deserts in the stands, down through India and Nepal, and across south through Southeast Asia into all the humidity, to Australia, across Australia and up through New Zealand before flying to the US, across the south of the US again to try and keep the weather a little bit warmer before I rolled back up through Europe from Portugal to get home again 16 months later, which was about 6 months ago today.
Oh, it's so exciting. Such a cool trip. I think I only cottoned on to it about halfway through with your very regular video blogs. I want to come on to how you captured that. But don't take this the wrong way, but you do remind me of myself in my 20s because, you know, when I got started in my career, I just watched Ellen MacArthur sailing around the world.
Yeah.
And I was a keen bike rider. I'd enjoyed doing some smaller trips like you. And I thought exactly like you just described, if I've only got one chance, and I had no idea what would come afterwards, if I've only got one chance, it's got to be the world. That just captivated me, that simple idea.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good starting point because I was aware that if I could document it and share it, people might be interested. I might come back and have some stories to write into a book, or I might be able to speak at some conferences or maybe even a podcast. But if nothing happened off the back of it, I'd still have had a massive adventure, which means you go and have this big goal and you can't really lose because you go and have an adventure. And if you come back and you have to go straight back into the 9 to 5, at least I could sit at my new desk dreaming back about something that I have done. So it seems like a win-win situation if you're willing to give it a go.
Yeah, and you say that with a lot of confidence having done it, but there must have been some trepidation heading into it because it's a massive unknown.
It is. But now that I've done it and now that I'm back, I'm realizing that I'm far more aware and scared of the unknown of what happens now in trying to make this into something bigger and make the most of the opportunity that I have now than how I felt then. Because to go and ride your bike around the world, you have a routine every day. You get up, you ride your bike a bit, you drink some coffee, you ride a bit more, you find bread, you ride some more, you eat your instant noodles in your tent, and then you go to sleep. So you have a routine. And I love every bit of that, which meant for 16 months or however long it was going to take me, I was pretty comfortable because that's what I'm good at. Coming back now and I'm trying to work out how to not have to get a proper job is a wonderful opportunity, but to me, it's so much scarier than trying to ride your bike around the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. Really interesting. I always like to ask about any particular highs and lows of these kinds of adventures. And I think you might have one particular, probably would be described as a low. I think something happened in Italy that was quite interesting. Can you tell us about that? What happened?
Yeah, so pretty early on, within the first couple of weeks, I was riding on a bike path in rural Italy and someone stopped me for a chat. It happens all the time. If you've got a loaded bike, you're interesting, you probably have a story to tell, and someone wanted a chat. And he very quickly decided that he wanted my bike, so he tried to tackle me off my bike and take it, which was pretty scary because I knew that there were risks that you take on if you're going to ride your bike around the world, but I didn't think it was going to happen on the outskirts of a small village in the mountains.
Pretty early on in your trip.
Yeah, it was day 15, 16, something like that. It's early days. I got away. My top tip if you're going to ride your bike and someone might try to tackle you off it is cycle up a hill so you're nice and sweaty, have lots of sun cream on so you're as greasy as possible. Makes it much easier to slip away. He didn't quite see it coming, but I managed to get out and get away. It put me back a bit, and I was pretty nervous if people wanted to talk to me.
When you say put it back, I mean, in practical terms, you hadn't lost anything, but I guess in terms of confidence.
Yeah, it was a confidence problem because I went into this trip excited at the opportunity to speak with strangers and learn about the places people come from, and suddenly what was such a rewarding thing was really stressful because every time someone wanted to come and talk to me, I was aware that they might also try to steal my bike. So I started for a while just sort of smiling and waving and just cycling past, it worked till I got into Albania. I was trying to get through the mountains on the way out to get into North Macedonia, and a man tried to stop me up in the mountains, a shepherd, allegedly, with a few animals, but most of the horses and donkeys had lots of white packages strapped all over. So he was definitely a shepherd, shepherding more than just animals out of Albania. And yeah, he wanted me to stop, and I tried to cycle past, so he jumped out into this track on the very remote mountains in the north of the country and pulled a shotgun out in my face and said, yeah, you got to pay or you don't go any further. And I didn't have any money because I just spent the end of my Albanian currency on biscuits, because you need carbs, don't you? So I had to try to explain that I didn't have money to give him. And
he wasn't after your biscuits?
He took them in the end.
Which biscuits?
I got them out to try and explain. As he calmed down enough to try to discuss, I can't speak Albanian. He couldn't really speak. He could speak angry words of English, but none of the useful words of English.
But it's interesting you say angry, because if you're in a mugging situation, the aggressor is often not I mean, you're scared because you're in a situation that you're not used to being in.
Yeah.
But the aggressor is weird to say this, but is more in their comfort zone than you are, because the aggressor is actually in control of the situation because they're the one that's surprised you with their move. But also, it suggests it's not their first rodeo. They've probably done this before. Whereas, if you don't go around your day-to-day life causing crime, then your stress response to being in a situation like that is likely to be higher. I've been mugged a couple of times and put in those situations, and I'm always surprised how calm the other person is. And I realise this is just your everyday life. This is your job. Whereas for me, I'm not used to being mugged, so I'm the one that has this insane adrenal response.
I think there's something that just seems innately scary about a very shaggy-looking, weather-worn Albanian man, where you can see up the end of a shotgun shouting words in a language that you don't quite understand.
Yeah.
That just puts the fear into you. And yeah, fortunately, got away without my biscuits. So I got all the biscuits out that had the price labels on, and I was trying to point to them and explain that this was my money, and I spent it in a shop that you could almost see at the end of the bottom of the valley far away. And he eventually sort of calmed down enough to come and have a look at them and picked up all the biscuits and helped himself, at which point I could smell smell alcohol, so he was drunk. And I guess drunk people like snacks, don't they? And so he claimed all the biscuits and told me to get lost. So I then cycled off thinking, like, you don't want to keep looking back, but is he about to shoot me as you cycle off? Who knows? But weirdly at the time, when I could smell that he'd been on the juice, it made me relax a bit, because it almost made it make sense. In retrospect, the idea of a drunk man pointing a shotgun at you, the risk is immense. Mistakes happen a lot more if you're drunk. So, yeah. But I got away. But yeah, it really shook me up. I went from being someone that was at the start of living the dream that I had spent my entire life thinking about, to waking up all night, every night with nightmares, and thinking I could see him when I was riding around, and just panicking all the time. And it's not something I'm familiar with. It's not how I usually live my life. I've been very fortunate.
But that's a genuine trauma.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
And that sort of part of your brain which is taking over and reliving that trauma is not a conscious thing, is it?
No. And the challenge is that. So I eventually got some help for it, which was really, really helpful. But
well, what do you mean by help? If somebody's listening and trying to make sense of this.
Yeah. So I phoned my doctor, but you know what it's like when you try to speak to your GP and you get through to the receptionist, who realised that I wasn't in the country and got booted out the door. No way you can speak to anyone, which was pretty disappointing, because it's quite hard to ask for help. It shouldn't be, but it took me a long time to get to the point where I was willing to give that a go. I was very fortunate that a friend knew about a charity that offer support in situations like this. They're called Big Moose.
Big Moose?
Big Moose, like the animal, but big. They're based in Cardiff. They're a wonderful, wonderful charity where they raise funds so that if somebody needs help, it can be free, because often getting support is prohibitively expensive. Or if you can get through your GP, there's a 10-week wait list, and no one asks for help 10 weeks in advance. People ask for help when you need it at the very last minute. Like, I was at beyond breaking point. It was terrifying.
And you were still on the road?
Yeah, I was in a little motel in North Macedonia.
For what? What kind of help can they offer on the phone that is of any
you
use?
fill in a form online, and within 24 hours within the next 24 hours, you hear back from one of their specialists. You give a little information about what the problem is, and it can be different for everyone. It can be stress at work or bereavement, whatever it might be that you're struggling with, and they work out who the best person to help is going to be. And then for the next, on and off through the next 8 months of the trip, at least once a week, I spoke to someone on a Zoom call for an hour in the evening.
I mean, is it psychologists?
Yeah, yes, exactly that. And so I mean, for them, pretty straightforward, because PTSD is, if you explain what happened and they know exactly what the problem is,
It's not like you're struggling to figure out at what point in your childhood something happened. This was like...
Yeah. I'm incredibly...
shotgun in your face.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that up until this point, I've had a fairly straightforward, wonderful time. And so there were two things that were pretty problematic. So yeah, I had help from them on and off through the rest of Europe. I then had to stop as I went into the deserts of Central Asia because there's no phone signal, which does they can fix a lot of the problems with accessing help, but they couldn't do that.
At any point did they say, look, you're going to have to stop the journey to fix this?
It was never, I think I put my foot down fairly early on that it was never something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to try to keep riding, but I was aware that I couldn't keep riding the way I was. So we tackled it the best we could, but it was harder to fix than it might be if I had come home, because I was still riding every day and being approached by strangers every day, all with the best intentions, as is the case for 99.9% of the people you will meet around the world. But yeah, it did stretch out the process of trying to move on past what happened.
The only thing I can relate to is the Atlantic capsize.
Yeah.
When I'd seen people paying that ultimate price in the mountains and dying in front of me, but at no point had I thought on expedition I'm going to die. And spending 14 hours paddling around in the Atlantic in my boxer shorts, I very clearly thought, if things don't go right and there's a bit of luck in the next while, I'm going to drown. I'm in the water and I'm going to drown. And I got married 8 weeks later after coming back from that capsize. And I was having lots of those recurring nightmares and troubled thoughts. And I spoke to a psychologist, and it was actually quite helpful, because one call with a psychologist to talk through what had happened in that sort of facing your mortality, the feedback at the time was, what you are dealing with is perfectly natural considering a life-death situation. And actually the psychologist at the time said, if you need to let your mind, like if you'd hurt a physical muscle, heal, repair. And there's actually a point where she said, I don't want to do too much counselling with you because you almost exacerbate the strain as if it was a muscular strain. She said, if in 6 months' time you're still having genuine trauma from this, then we'll take a more formal approach.
Yeah.
But a couple of phone calls and a bit of perspective and time was incredibly powerful. Because again, it was something that I just felt like I needed to get out of my own head a little bit. And I had no idea how to sort of stop my mind going in these mad loops on that trauma.
And that was exactly the challenge that I had, where when you ride your bike all day, every day, you have a lot of time for your mind to go in loops. And that's one of the wonderful things about doing a bike ride like this. But it's also, it can be damaging if you have so much time to fill with thinking about the wrong things. But I guess exactly the same situation where it turns out that the specialists who know what they're doing, when you allow them to try to help, it really helps. And I think that's the biggest thing that for so long, I just thought, what's someone in an office in another country going to do to help me here? And obviously it helped. Of course it did. They know what they're doing. And I think that was just a really, to accept that someone else might be able to help, I think was really important.
I love the fact that after that you took the time and effort to fundraise for that charity.
Yeah, I didn't set out to raise money to ride around the world because it was a very selfish endeavour where I wanted a big adventure. That was purpose number one, was for me to go on a big adventure.
Hell yeah.
Which is if people want to raise money, huge respect. But for me, I just wanted a big adventure. But once I had so much support from them, and by the time I got through Southeast Asia, I was aware that I wouldn't have got that far if I had not had the support I'd had. Having grown a large audience online, it felt like the right thing to do. I launched a fundraiser and it's closed now and it's finished on, it's over £20,000, which is fantastic. As I went on, it felt, I'm proud of riding around the world, but I'm more proud that people will have heard about the charity from seeing it on the platform that I've created, and to be able to fund support for people that might need it feels good.
What's the charity called?
The charity's called Big Moose. Perhaps if you have links that go out with these podcasts, I'll send you over the website
100%,
because it's a really important resource for people to have in mind, because I only knew it existed because I was fortunate that one of my friends knew of them and could signpost me in that direction. If you don't know it's there, no one can use it. So many people will need support with something at some point in their lives. If people know it exists, they can send it to friends or to family. It's really important.
The Endurance Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Enjoy Travel. Huge thanks for all that they do. And I don't need to introduce my co-host, but over to Martin Mansell to explain Enjoy Travel.
So Enjoy Travel brings you car hire, hotels, airport parking lounges with a loyalty platform, meaning you buy 9, you get your 10th free. And you can mix and match across any range of our products. You don't need to just buy 10 car hire, you could buy a hotel, a car hire. And we're giving you a special discount code to celebrate our podcast, which is RID3R, as in rider, and you'll get up to 30% off everything.
So click on Enjoy Travel. It's been amazing for these epics, makes our travel so much more enjoyable and seamless. So thanks Martin, thanks Enjoy Travel. So I certainly don't want to spend the whole podcast making this sound like it was a huge trauma. It was clearly a life-changing, amazing cycle around the world. And I mean, if you follow your social media, you clearly loved it. We've quite importantly focused on some of the challenges so far. Let's go to some of the highlights. I know that you loved, I'm very jealous, the stands. I've done the southern tier through Iran, Pakistan, India. I've done the northern tier through Russia, Mongolia, China. That middle bit I've never done. So tell me about that.
Before I left, there were certain bits that felt more exciting than others, and the idea of going through the stands on my bike in the middle of summer just lit me up. I had to fly over the Caspian Sea because I couldn't get cover to go through Russia, and I couldn't go through Iran if I wanted to go into the US later on. So I set off through Kazakhstan into Uzbekistan and then north into Kyrgyzstan. It was, 6 weeks of desert, emptiness, no one around, no phone signal. Exactly what I went for. I then got to the east of Uzbekistan, I got to Samarkand, and my dad flew out to ride a section with me, to ride up north up the old silk trading routes, which is quite important because I grew up in a family where being outside and riding bikes and going on short bike trips is the norm. It's what we did in our summer holidays. So for him to come out and do a bit that I've grown up with him reading books about the Silk Road, he's lit up and inspired by it, and that's probably why I am. So to have him out was really special. To go up through Kyrgyzstan was just incredible. It's so beautiful. The mountains are so big and the valleys are so vast and empty. It's just incredible. I got quite sick when I was there, which is frustrating. I spent a week in hospital in Kyrgyzstan with pneumonia, turned out. I wondered why. My dad's pretty fit. He's a strong cyclist. And I was quite tired because I had cycled there from London. I was carrying more kit. My bike was heavier. It was very bumpy off-road, and we were at high altitude up to sort of 3,000 meters. But we went over one pass, and he was living the dream, and I was just absolutely rinsed. I just couldn't do it. And I know he's fit, but he's not that fit. And we descended down the other side and tried to have a rest day. And I woke up and just couldn't breathe. I was really sick. So I spent a week in a small mountain health clinic on a drip to try and get over pneumonia. So it's somewhere that I loved, but I have to go back because I scratched the surface of the adventure that could be had on a bike in the stands.
What's the terrain like in those places you just described? Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. Is there even roads? Is it desert? What's it like? What kind of bike were you on? I know there's a load of questions there.
Yeah,
so I'm fascinated.
Yeah. Through Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, it was almost entirely surfaced. Not always a good road surface, but not dirt roads. into Kyrgyzstan and into the mountains, far more dirt roads. I was on a gravel bike. The gravel bike is here, but that's no use for people listening. It's a titanium gravel bike, a Riley gradient, clearance for 40mm tyres. So I was off-road as much as possible because that's what I find interesting. But I couldn't go as off-road as you might in some of the mountain ultras or mountain bikes because I was carrying too much gear. So there's a balance you've got to strike. In Kyrgyzstan, I got to the limits of what was doable on the bike that I had with me. And that's exactly where I want to be. It feels like if you're going to have a big adventure, you need to get right to the edge of what your kit's capable of doing.
It's funny actually because it's quite a big trade show. There's hundreds of exhibitors, and the corner that we're in, we've got a 4-meter square stand. The one next door is Riley, and your photograph has been staring at us for the last 2 days.
And the bike to the left, closest to us, is the one I did the trip on as well. So that's the around the world bike.
This
Not so useful for everyone. That one there.
That's your bike?
That's the one.
All right.
It looks pretty good, you know.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
I crashed it multiple times.
Sorry, this is not very helpful.
It's really not.
Even for those watching on YouTube, we are now talking about what's happening off camera. So we'll film this afterwards. But Duncan's bike's over there.
Yeah, it was epic. You know that bike could have. When I got to the finish in London, the bike could have just gone on and done another lap. It was far stronger than the rider, and I think that's the right choice for your kit. You know,
that's also very, very, very cool. Right, we've got so much more of the world to get through. So we've got through Europe, a big chunks of Central Asia. You then headed on down through Southeast Asia, Australasia. So take us on in the adventure.
I flew over Afghanistan. You can ride through it. I didn't fancy it. It didn't quite sit right with me. So I flew over into New Delhi. I then rode through north of India, across the length of Nepal, and then down to Kolkata. It was incredibly different to the calm and the peace of the deserts that I'd just been in. Not only was it suddenly incredibly busy and loud and lots of people trying to talk to me compared to the peace and solitude you have in the deserts, it was also super humid. I'd had heat, but I hadn't had humidity.
Oh, God.
And
how would you describe, I'm interested how you describe cycling in India.
The first thing that everybody wants to ask about cycling in India is what the roads were like. My first day in India was cycling out of New Delhi. And honestly, it's probably safer than riding in London because drivers there know how to behave when they see someone on a bike because so many people ride bikes.
Agreed.
It's loud, it's chaotic, it was overwhelming, and I was still not in a place where I particularly enjoyed people approaching me to try to talk. And if that's a struggle, India's probably not the place to ride a bike.
It's just like your senses are just absolutely battered.
Yeah.
It's more colourful, it's louder, it's intoxicating. It's amazing, but it's quite tiring at the same time.
What I thought was fascinating about it was that as I reached Kolkata to leave the country, I had a wonderful time and lots of great experiences, but in my head I was never again. I cannot do this. And I would love to go back now. You know, the more time I've had, the more I realise what there is on offer in a country
it's so
like
rich.
this. Just the food, if nothing else.
I described it as I was so excited to get there and I was so excited to leave, which makes it sound like I didn't enjoy it, but I think it was just so intense in every way.
It really is, and I think I also wasn't in the right mindset to be able to do justice for the best attempt I could make at enjoying a country like India. I wasn't in a position yet where I was completely at ease with the amount of attention I was getting, and that made it more difficult.
And it can be quite claustrophobic, can't it?
Yeah, you go into a small motel at the end of the day and it's like lie under a fan with your ears ringing.
Yeah. And you stop and they're immediately like holding your hand and in a very British way, you're like, you're in my space.
There are so many photos out there of me holding babies. Like, I'm touched that you wanted me to hold your baby for a photo, but I'm so glad I got to give them all back. You know, like the fear that somebody was going to pass me a baby and disappear off into the crowds and my trip would become one of two, you know. It's an incredible experience. I will go back at some point, but incredibly different to the stands. I then rode off down through Southeast Asia, which was a little bit easier. People are still keen to chat, but a little more respectful in a way that we're used to. So it was easier, but by the time I got to Kuala Lumpur, the end of my time in Asia, I was so done. I was just pretty burnt out and a bit frustrated because I love adventure. Going off into the desert or into the mountains, having to work hard on the bike and try to look after myself to stay safe is my thing. And through India, Nepal and Southeast Asia, it felt a lot more like the opportunities were there for travel and culture, which is interesting, but it's not what I'd set out to do. So to then be able to go into Australia where I could chase adventure again came just in time. I was certainly ready for it.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, sorry, over to you, Martin.
Well, let's carry on then. So we've covered probably half the world now or more, half the world. We've got Australia, New Zealand, USA. I love Australia. I've been a good few times. Tell me about your experience of Australia.
I flew into Perth and I left Perth on Christmas Eve. There was something where, having spent so much time on my own, although I had some lovely families out there who offered for me to spend Christmas with them, I sort of realised that actually I'd probably rather head off and get riding and have Christmas on the road. So I rode out of Perth and onto the Nullarbor. I spent the next few weeks riding to Adelaide, which was just incredible. I had a night with the Southern Lights, the Aurora Australis.
Oh, wow.
I woke up in the middle of the night, got out my tent for a pee, and sort of looked up and realised that the whole sky was turning pink. And having thought that I had seen big things like the expanse of a desert or the size of a mountain, mountains on the horizon go up by a little bit of what you can see. Something like the entire sky turning pink is, I can't do justice to explaining how big that is. It was just beautiful. So I really enjoyed going across the desert. It felt like people were warning me I wouldn't be able to do it in the peak of Australian summer. And actually, it was fine. I know what I'm doing. I could do that. So
How hot did it get?
It got up to 40 degrees, but I'd had, 47, 48 in southern Turkey. In the bottom of Turkey, there was a heat wave, there were wildfires, roads were melting. So, you ride through Uzbekistan and it's hot and it's pretty empty. The Nullarbor Plain is pretty deserted, but there's a roadhouse where you can get a full cooked breakfast every 100 kilometres. It's a good place to go for an adventure. I really enjoyed it, but it was by no means the most remote place I rode my bike. And then rode up to Brisbane, flew out to Brisbane to sort of south in New Zealand and did a bit of a lap in the South Island because everyone says the South Island is the beautiful place for a beautiful adventure, which it was, but it was very, very wet. I spent a few weeks being eaten by sandflies, getting wetter and wetter, ride in the rain all day, get the occasional glimpse of a nice mountain before the clouds come back again and you sit damp in your tent at the end of the day. I'd love to go back. It was a beautiful place with a really great network of off-road cycling trails being built now as well. So it's definitely somewhere I'd love to go back to in the future. From there, I flew across the US. I flew into Los Angeles, and this was sort of springtime, so I stayed quite far south to try and stay warm. I can do deserts. I'm all right at hot weather. I'm not very good at getting cold, so I decided to stay south. Some people are good at it, and they can't imagine sweating all day. But I'd rather be sweaty and hot than cold.
Totally agree.
I stayed south and followed the Mexican border. I rode across sort of out to California, into Arizona, up onto the divide in New Mexico, and then downhill all the way to the East Coast.
So you're basically shadowing I-10 all the way across, but taking smaller routes.
A lot of it, there's a cycling version of Route 66.
Yeah.
So I followed quite a lot of that, and it was fantastic. It wasn't what I expected. We could do an entire podcast on what it was like to cycle in America. I don't know what I expected, but small towns are so far apart. Small towns outside of big towns are just shells. There's so little there. There's one gas station. The only time you get to have some vegetables is if you can find a Subway and they have some salads. Otherwise, you can't find any fresh produce. So much of the middle of the US is classified as food desert because you can't get fresh food. To go into one of the most developed countries in the world and not see vegetables and fruit for weeks, it came as a real surprise. But I also met so many wonderful, wonderful, kind people. I got quite sick. At one point I got pneumonia again. I crashed and broke some ribs. And the time I spent recovering from that and waiting for some new parts to be sent out from breaking stuff on my bike welcomed into family homes for a week. You make friends that are for life, that you'll never forget. And it's really important to remember things like that when, for all countries all over the world, where you hear horror stories about how bad stuff is, and there is horrible stuff happening all over the world, but the people in most countries, the normal people, are fantastic wherever you go, which is my lasting impression from the US.
And that kindness of strangers really comes out when you turn up on your own on a bicycle.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the storytelling element. I would encourage people to follow you online. Instagram is how I follow you. Is there a better way?
Instagram's the only place you'll find. Strava as well. Get on Strava so you can see all the stats. But
Okay,
Instagram's where the videos go.
Good. But tell me a little bit about the format of your storytelling, because you managed to grow a pretty good army throughout it, and there was a real formula to how you were doing the storytelling.
When I set off, I had committed to sharing some stuff online because some brands had jumped on board to help support the trip, which I agreed to in the build-up to the ride. I set off on day one, having said I was going to make a video at the end of each day, and realised I had absolutely no idea how to edit videos, what I was going to do. So at the end of the first day, I filmed a summary of what had happened, clipped in a few bits I'd shot through the day, and that was a nice, easy thing to edit. If you don't know what you're doing, I could film it all on my phone, I could edit it all on my phone, and I could tell the story of what happened. What else was I going to talk about, The first few days, it became very clear that some parts of the day were not particularly story-worthy, and the lovely person that you meet in a camper van that passes a beer out the window, that's a story that people want to hear. So as I went through the day, I tried to film little snippets of whatever it was that made that day special. And then at the end of the day, I'd record a voiceover as I was riding along, usually, because why stop? Why not keep riding? And then I'd sit in my tent at the end of the day and edit the video and put it on Instagram. I had no intention of building a large following on social media. It's never been something I've aspired for. But within the first 3 days, there were 50,000 people following it, which was a real surprise. It was not the point of the trip, but it became pretty valuable. That's why the fundraiser did so well. And
it's such a simple formula. And if people want to understand or copy what you did, it's remembering like the key points during the day, capturing them, and then towards the end of the day, just doing a piece to camera when you're chatting about it, and then having those shots to edit over the top, which is, of course, the simplest of all. It's just B-roll to cover the narrative.
Yeah.
But because you did it consistently every single day, I guess people then start to look forward to it. What did that day look like? And you can sort of hear in your voice, and because you're chatting on the bike, you can see the emotions. Are you up? Are you down? Are you having a good day? Is it raining? Like, what is that? And then you've taken the time during the day to capture those highlights. I like the fact that there was a formula to it. And clearly people do it in different ways, but you kept it beautifully simple, and the consistency paid off.
I think consistency paid off, but also the fact that it was pretty raw and it was very honest. And people could see early on that I wasn't exaggerating stuff. I wasn't trying to be an influencer who could shout about how hardcore they are for doing what they're doing. And I wasn't trying to look like a superhero. I wasn't trying to make it look beautiful and pristine and perfect. I was trying to just give a real summary of what happened, as much as anything, because I want to be able to watch those videos when I'm grey and old and reflect on what I did and recognize the guy that's on the video. And it turns out that that's actually quite unique on social media in a world where there's so much that's polished and perhaps a little bit too prescribed and perfect. Seeing something that people realize is authentic,
it's a diary,
is very, very valuable.
It's a video diary.
And I'm so glad that I wouldn't have been able to do it if I couldn't do it that way. If I had to try to shout at the camera to be someone that I'm not, I wouldn't have been able to make the videos every day, and I don't think people would have watched them. So I think my key bit of advice for anyone that wants to share something, if you go on a big adventure, you have stories to tell. Let that do the talking. You don't have to edit anything fancy. You don't have to do anything more than that. You just have to tell the exciting stories you've got, and people will want to hear them.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so bringing it to a close then, we've done Australia, we've done the US. So where did you end up in the US, and what was the end? How did the end go?
I finished in South Carolina, in Charleston. I flew to Lisbon, and then it's a pretty short hop home from there. I rode out of Portugal across to Barcelona, a friend came and joined me for that section. He joined a couple of times throughout the trip, and it was really nice to have someone to chat with and reflect upon what had been a crazy, crazy year. Also crossed paths with my parents, who by chance were also riding in Spain at the same time, before I rode back up over the Pyrenees and through France, solo, back into London, which I think was really important to have a bit of space to reflect on what I'd done. I got back into London. Sponsors had sort of organised a finish line that people could come and join me. So 50 odd people rode in from Box Hill, which was absolute carnage. Having ridden all the way by myself to then have a very knackered bike with all my kit on it and then load of road bikes around, it was like a proper Cat 4 crit. It was crazy, but I survived back into London to roll in and be greeted with the challenge of what comes next.
How did you feel? What was you feeling at the very end point?
I thought I had enough time beforehand to soak it all up and be ready to just roll in and be pretty proud to have finished, but I got to the end and I just sobbed. It was wild.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't expect that kind of emotion, and I think it's because although I believed in myself that it was going to be possible, there were so many times along the way that it felt like maybe it wasn't going to happen, and I think the relief that actually I'd done it was pretty special. I was also just really tired. I left myself a little bit short to get back up through France for the date that we had agreed I would finish on. So the final week I should have been able to do nice and slowly to save up some energy for all the socialising that was going to come on the final day. But in the end, I'd been smacking out some big days in the rain up through France. So I rolled into London as an absolute shell. It took quite a long time to get my head around it. And honestly, 6 months on now, I haven't quite got my head around it. And I'm starting to realise that I don't think you do get your head around it. I think it's such an enormous thing that if you could get your head around it in one go and summarise it in a sentence, you probably wouldn't have had the incredibly rich adventure that you find when you're out on the road. And I'm beginning to come to terms with the fact that I probably can't expect that to happen.
I think it's so cool. If I zoom out and reflect on all the conversations that we've had, Martin, over recent months, so many people with decades and decades of experience, and yes, you've been riding a bike your whole life, but you're 6 months back from this incredible circumnavigation. I know you've got some more adventures in the planning, but you're at that stage where you're just making sense of your first big epic. I love following the tail end of that journey when I sort of cottoned on to what you were doing. An absolute pleasure to welcome you onto the Endurance Podcast. Hopefully it's not the last time we'll speak to you, because I know there's some other big adventures awaiting. But for now, I would just say enjoy it, keep doing what you're doing. You're a great communicator. You've got a wonderful way of sharing, really authentically what you do. So whether it's, writing that or continuing to do the social media content, I wish you every success with it, because I know that the way you're communicating this will inspire others to get out there as well. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Well, a big thank you for listening into the Endurance Podcast series and joining Martin, myself and Duncan Covey. What an amazing adventure. One which I really recognise being the circumnavigation. But yeah, love to hear what you thought of that.
So the Adventure Travel show is drawing to a close. It's late Sunday evening. Done 8 amazing podcasts. I've got one last thing left to say.
I was very aware of all the banging and clattering as people broke down the show in the background, so hopefully you heard us okay.
Last thing to say. Here it comes. Share it, comment, like, subscribe.
See you next time.